Alright. Hello. How you guys doing? This is a video for assignment number 3 of ECON0009. Just a little thing just to make sure you guys get what you have to do and just so there's no confusion, okay? To be clear, disclaimer, again, I'm not perfect. I'm not sure that what I'm saying is correct. Please don't take it directly. Okay. Let's continue. So, first of all, let's look at our assignment. Write an editorial or an op-ed about how the UK government should use a given amount of funding on education. So basically we're saying, how should the UK fund education, pretty much. Use the articles listed below, in addition to lecture materials, assigned readings, and other relevant material, for reference, and the examples listed below as a guide. So, you guys know the deal. I'd recommend writing a first draft that is also under 300 words. Personal recommendation, of course, you can write whatever you want, as long as it isn't under 500 words. But I feel it's easier to edit when you have 300 words to start, rather than slimming down from 500 words, in a personal opinion. Anyway, we have here some articles. I've got some ones I've added. So we've got 2 articles here, School Resources and Student Outcomes, an overview of the literature and new evidence from North and South Carolina, and Subsidies, Hierarchy and Peers, the Awkward Economics of Higher Education. Okay, we're going to look through these 2 articles. So we can see here that we've got a lot of sort of discussion about stuff. In fact, this is a 21-page article. Okay, now, full disclaimer, you're not supposed to read the entire article. It's good if you read the entire article, sure. It may give you a little bit more detail, but overall, reading an entire article is not necessary to understand it. Okay? Looking at graphs is useful. So, for example, figure 2 here would be a useful thing to look at, but it's not necessary. Okay? What you generally want to do when you're looking at these articles is go directly to the conclusion. Okay? This doesn't mean that you essentially lose detail just like that. Normally the conclusion is quite good at summarizing what the study is saying. If there's an abstract as well, you want to read that. Okay? But generally just reading the abstract and conclusion will work for now. Okay? Obviously, if you're asked to reference something or study in more detail, then I'd recommend reading the entire paper, if you can. But just now, abstract and conclusion is good. So looking here, we can see that it says, we do not believe that the evidence justifies so strong a conclusion. And what it's saying here, does it say that school resources matter in educational attainment? And there's not a strong conclusion here. We don't know for sure. The available evidence is not unambiguous or ubiquitous, and it suffers from all the standard criticisms of drawing causal inferences. So, from what we're seeing in the data, we're essentially seeing that we can't draw a causal relation effect between educational attainment and school resources. The school resources and educational attainment. So, yeah, interpreting the literature starts from one's prior expectation. So we can say that someone may interpret the literature in different ways depending on what they expected before. Because there's a lot of opposing views, people can side with one side and say, oh, look, I'm supported. See? So, yeah. It says, not much is known about schooling. While the most of the literature on test scores points to little, if any, effect of school resources, some observational studies point to one actual experiment have made a connection. Decisions about educational resources and reform have to be made in an environment of much uncertainty. So we're saying essentially that resources and their effect on educational attainment is uncertain in a relationship. Let's look at the next one. This is the second needed one. We have the Awkward Economics of Higher Education. Again, this one doesn't have an abstract, but it does have an introduction. This is a useful one, but I'm not going to go through it. I'm going to go through the conclusion. You can see here, conclusion. This one is fairly short. This paper suggests that standard economic intuition and analogies, built on an understanding of profit-making firms, are likely to be a poor guide. Hold on, let me zoom in actually. Yeah. Basically, if you're treating as education with standard economic intuition on profit making, then it's going to be a poor guide for understanding how to make policy for education. Yeah. So it says here, one who thinks a college is like any other business looks in all the wrong places. So you're saying here that essentially, if you treat a college or an institution of higher education like a business, it doesn't work in the same way. Policy doesn't apply to it in the same way. Okay? That's the main thing to glean from this. Okay? You can also, yeah, structure of higher education is very complicated. Our economies, economics and intuition about for-profit businesses don't just obscure what's happening in colleges and universities, they can also seriously distort understandings of policy. That's a good last line, okay? Try to think about how you can reinterpret that. Okay, I'm going to show you guys one of the ones I picked, okay? This one is Educational Inequality, the Widening Socioeconomic Gap, published by Mansion Vignoles, which I think we may have done, but I think this is a different paper of theirs, so... Huzzah! You can also, on that topic, let's look at learning block number 3. You can use some of these as well. So, for example, if you want to use the comparative context of the United Kingdom, or perhaps the overview here, or you could use something from Boyas Labour Economics, then go ahead. Okay, I just used this one because I like it. So this was published in Fiscal Studies, 2004. It's a reputable journal, I'm all good. So what this essentially tells you, okay, so it says, education basically promotes social mobility. Equality of access to education is a central plank of many policies to advance children from less well-off backgrounds, to break generational cycles of deprivation, and to encourage economic growth. Okay, so the thing is, as the educational... let me just skip to the conclusion, because I'm not going to take you guys too far through it. What we're essentially saying is that the links between socioeconomic factors and educational attainment factors have increased. So now it is more likely that if you are rich, you'll get a good education, and if you're if you're poor, then you'll get a worse education. It's more likely for that because socioeconomic disparities have been strengthened. This is quite a bad thing, as you could probably expect. Also, we're also seeing that, what was it? Yeah, what else? Yeah, so for example, there was also a line referencing... Yeah, so we basically just expanding the system, but expanding the education system doesn't work because it disproportionately affects higher income students. So it is, hold on, where is it? The rapid expansion of the higher education system has disproportionately benefited the most privileged students. Okay, that's something to note. So what I did was I wrote my thing here. Okay, so here's my first draft. Let me just enlarge the text so you guys can see it. Okay, now, look at just the draft here. Okay, first of all, I've broken it up into little points. Okay, just to make it a little easier to read. I've started with generally a strong line, although I don't know if it's that strong. Education has always been difficult to properly fund. Okay, something like that. And a lot of stuff like this. Now, I'm not saying this is perfect. I definitely have some stuff to improve on for my final draft, but this is a good first draft, I think. What's notable, you've got to include your references. Okay, a lot of people have messed up on previous drafts and stuff like that, but not including their references to graphs or studies or whatever. Include your references. Okay, that'll make you go off well. Okay, also, if you want to have a look at other editorials, you've got stuff from The Guardian. Reload the page. Oh yeah, I think I remember how to do this. So if you want to bypass that firewall at The Guardian, you basically say register for free and then you press back. Did that work? It did not. I'll do it later. Oh, just press I'll do it later. Okay, fine. Press I do it later, it'll be fine. Let's try NY Times. New York Times, I believe. This one doesn't have a firewall, so you're all good. Yeah, so this should work. If these just so you guys know, these articles aren't relevant to what we're looking at. They're not about education. They're just about economics, okay? But they're good at looking at how you write an op-ed or an editorial, okay? Because it's a little more, okay, think about writing this, it's a little more free flow than your other stuff, okay? You're not writing it very prescriptively, you're not writing it looking at the studies for detail, you're writing it a bit more around the subject, okay? Now, if you want to sort of take into account a lot of stuff in the subject, you can't reference a lot, otherwise it's going to end up as a journal article, right? An op-ed is a bit looser. As you can see here, you've got a few references here, just to basic stuff. But op-eds don't include references. I mean, looking at both of these, you're not seeing many like large reference sections, are you? You're seeing small links in the text, but you're not seeing anything that says reference here, here, here. Okay? Now, obviously, it's different because we're doing it in a university context, but try to be a little lighter with how you're talking. Okay? Feel free to sort of go around the subject, think more about it. So what I said, for example, a better way to see how to fund education is to look at the outcomes and what we want to see instead. Okay? That's purely me. Okay? I didn't definitively prove that was a better way of looking at education. I just think that that's true. Okay? It's opinion. All right? And that's somewhat allowed. Okay? So what I've suggested from my data I've seen so far is that because we don't know the effects of resources, and because we also know that firms don't really work in the same way as businesses, we need to consider not rather what works in the context of businesses, but what works in the context of education, and what we want to see in education. Okay? That's why I've used the socioeconomic gap, because I'm saying that if higher education disproportionately affects higher income students and it's giving more to them, then using funding to help fund lower income students, or perhaps even eliminate costs altogether for students instead of paying universities directly, would be a much better use of funding instead of increasing in areas where we do not know they have an effect. I should probably make that a little clearer in my next draft, but that's a good start. Try to come up with an interesting conclusion. That's a nice thing as well. I mean, you can say a lot, but you can say a little at the same time, okay? If you're just describing what you've been given, it's not really that fun. Try to come up with something yourself. It could be really anything. Any conclusion will be fine enough. Just make sure it's backed up by some evidence. Okay, I think I'm all done. Obviously, if you guys have any questions, feel free to contact me. I'll be putting my first draft, if you guys want to look at it, in the description. Otherwise, I think that's all. Okay, have a nice day, guys. Bye.